Simon & Schuster Audio presents Star Trek: Dark Victory by William Shatner with Judith and Garfield Reeves-Stevens. Read by William Shatner.
The Enterprise hung dead in space, surrounded by the floating ruin of the crossover device, like an ancient sunken vessel shrouded in kelp and debris. The mighty ship's running lights were out, her nacelles were dark, but she was intact and her batteries were keeping life support at minimal levels. Kirk and Picard stood together before the Voyager's main screen. Spock and Telani were with them. Kirk turned to Picard. "Jean-Luc, I'm sorry." Picard flashed a smile. "Don't be. I still have her. We saved her." Kirk went to give Picard his hand, but both men stared awkwardly at the bandages that protected Kirk's damaged flesh. Picard put his own hands on Kirk's shoulders instead. "You saved her, and I thank you." Then LaForge spoke up from the aft sensor station. "Captain?" Both Kirk and Picard turned as one. Yes. LaForge smiled. "Captain Picard, Scotty and I have completed our structural analysis, and she's not showing any signs of transporter misalignment." That was a relief to them all. The subspace shockwave generated by the Sovereign's warp core explosion had shut down the transporter effect, intended to beam the Enterprise into the mirror universe. All was well. But apparently Spock did not think so. "Curious. I was certain I detected a full transporter field effect before the warp core detonation." Kirk smiled at his old friend. "We've never seen a transporter this big before, Spock. There's bound to be engineering differences we know nothing about." Picard looked down at his Klingon armor as if suddenly realizing he still had it on. "I suppose I should clean up. The relief vessels will be here in 2 hours. Kirk watched Picard walk to the turbolift, pleased his friend still had his starship. Then Telani hugged him. "And James, I want to get you down to Dr. McCoy to get those dressings changed. I'm not going to change all those diapers by myself." Kirk grinned at the thought of that one new mission. He couldn't wait for it to begin. Then he turned to his Vulcan friend. "Spock, just when the Voyager came in on the attack, you said you and your mirror counterpart had worked out what made the two universes diverge? But not the event, Captain, the time period. Approximately 300 years ago, about the time of the first contact between humans and Vulcans, Kate Janeway gave us a clue when she referred to Lake Sloan on Alpha Centauri 4 as being called Lake Riker in her universe. The fact that the lake was named by Zephyr Cochrane, following his move from Earth to the colony he founded on that world, made us focus on the time of first contact." Spock's long face took on a thoughtful expression. "But there is nothing conclusive. In one universe, our universe, humans and Vulcans shared an optimistic dream of combining their resources to seek out new life. In the mirror universe, the same cooperation followed. The same early expeditions took place. But there was a decidedly military aspect to their nature, almost as if somehow those responsible for first contact believed some grave threat was waiting for them among the stars." Kirk looked back at the screen and the Enterprise. He would leave the mirror universe to others. The mirror Janeway and Taval would return to their war with all the technical information that Kirk could provide them. The mirror Spock would be treated for Bendai here and given sanctuary until Taval judged it was safe for him to return. Kirk smiled at Telani, the woman with whom he had created life. "Will you marry me?" Telani looked at him with eyes that saw into his soul. "James, what are you going to do about that stump on Chow?" "Phaser it out of existence. I'll borrow one from Memlon's mother." Telani laughed. Then she looked to the screen, past the ship and the storms, to where the stars waited. "What about out there?" "I don't know. Maybe I'll farm. Maybe we can breed that horse Jean-Luc sent me. Maybe I'll buy a starship, and we can find out how many other Chals are out there. You, me, and our son." Telani smiled at him. "Or our daughter." Kirk pulled her closer. "All our children." Whatever waits for me, I'm going to face it with you. Instantly, Kirk and Taylani broke apart. Janeway was on her feet, reading the tactical boards. It's the Enterprise. All systems, they're coming back online. Weapons lock. Taval called out. We're being hailed. All eyes went to the main screen as the image of the drifting Enterprise winked out, to be replaced by a transmission from that ship's bridge. It was fully staffed. All consoles lit and active. But none of that mattered, because of the man who sat in her center chair. If Taylani grabbed his arm in fear, Kirk did not feel her grip. His heart thundered in his ears. Every thought in his mind was banished, replaced by a primal dread that lived deep in the darkness of his mind. Because when he looked at the man in the center chair, the face he saw was his own. And that face laughed at him. James T. Kirk, I've heard so much about you. I owe you so much more. Taval looked up from her station. They're powering phasers. Kirk struggled through his shock to find his voice. Who are you? The man in the center chair leaned forward. You can call me Tiberius. Kirk leaned against the helm console for support. Why are you here? You stole a universe from me, James, and now I'm here to do the same to you. Lower your shields and surrender. You have 10 seconds to comply, or you will die. Emperor Tiberius sat back in the center chair of the Enterprise. Behind Kirk, on the Mirror Voyager's bridge, Catherine Janeway lunged for the con. Kirk shouted at her, "No!" Janeway reached the controls, and he felt the ship's warp core generator sing its song in the vibration of the deck. He leaned over the central flight control console to reach the controls on the captain's side, then gasped with pain as he discovered that he could do nothing with his ruined hands. Hours ago, Translator feedback had destroyed the controls of the runabout he had piloted. He had kept the craft on course, completed his mission, but had paid the price in charred flesh, shattered bones, now wrapped in McCoy's glittering bandages. Taylani! He called out to his beloved, who, no more than a moment ago, had agreed to become his wife. No more than a month ago, in the peace of a glade on Chal, their love had quickened their child within her. Taylani, child of Kronos and of Romulus, Klingon warrior and Romulan tactician, vaulted over the console, and her arm cut across Janeway's neck. Without functioning hands, Kirk did what he could. He charged around the console to reach the empty con, even as the bridge tilted and the Voyager began her suicidal run at the Enterprise, just as Janeway had intended. In the Mirror Universe, this Janeway had lived as a Terran slave to the Klingon-Cardassian alliance. This Janeway burned with hate, directed at one man, Tiberius, just as her starship was now directed in a suicidal collision course with the Enterprise. But on the view screen, Tiberius did the unexpected. He abruptly broke off his countdown, and he commanded his gunner to target the Voyager. Hunched over the controls on the flight control console, Kirk tore with his teeth at the bandages on his right hand. As they fluttered to the floor, they took with them shreds of torn flesh. The Voyager shuddered as the first salvo from the Enterprise's aft phasers blazed around her shields. On the screen, Tiberius grinned fiercely, his face the face of triumph. On the Voyager's bridge, it seemed as if Kirk was now the beast, broken, bleeding, desperate, but not desperate to kill. On his right hand, the thumb was still intact. He jammed it down on the helm controls. Scotty, LaForge, everything to the starboard shields, now! Kirk succeeded in forcing the ship into a turn. Her undamaged starboard shields absorbed the full charge. The bridge lights flickered. The structural integrity of the field fluctuated. Scott called out, "We've lost half the shield nose. We cannot go to warp." Suddenly, Janeway broke free of Taylani and rushed Kirk at the console. "We can't protect ourselves. Let it end now." But Kirk shouldered her away even as Taylani recaptured her. "It's not your decision. You're not alone on this ship." The grinning image of Tiberius vanished from the view screen, leaving in its place a blur of streaming images, the roiling clouds of the golden discontinuity in which the two starships were embedded. the two asteroids in their decaying orbit rushing dangerously closer to each other. The Enterprise, encased in its metallic, webbed cage. Janeway struggled in vain to escape Tilani's hold. It's him or us! But Kirk focused on his ship and survival. There is always another way. Spock was already at tactical. Phasers, Captain. On my mark, Spock. Janeway shrieked with fury and frustration. We can't outfight that ship! Kirk brought the Voyager around to face the Enterprise's stern. We don't have to outfight the ship, just the man. Confusion dampened Janeway's rage. Tiberius is not firing. Kirk's attention was on the positions of the Enterprise and the intricate construction that wrapped her like a mechanistic cocoon. Of course he's not firing. Not after what he went through to build that device. He's not about to risk shooting it. Spock, has the Enterprise enlarged her shields to protect the device? She has, Captain. Kirk nodded, unsurprised. It was what he would have done in the same situation. Jean-Luc Picard rushed onto the bridge, still in the Klingon armor he had taken from his mirror counterpart. The captain of the Enterprise looked at the view screen in shock. Kirk, what is this? Kirk could not respond. There was no time. Already the vastly more powerful starship was beginning to slip out of its metallic cage. Once the Enterprise was free, the Voyager's remaining lifetime would be measured in seconds. He brought the Voyager about to face the closed end of the device. Even as the Enterprise had backed halfway out, he told Spock, watch the shield intensity on the forward section of the cage. When the tip of it shows through the shields, Spock watched the display. Understood. Shield strength over the device is at 11%. 6, 3, 0. Kirk gave the order, fire! A thin blue stream of phased energy shot from the Voyager to find its target. A few square meters of metal and wire no longer protected by the Enterprise's shields. The full power of the Voyager's weapons raced along the web of metal inside the Enterprise's shields. The shields of the great starship did not allow energy out, and her shield generators failed. A subspace compression wave swept out to engulf Voyager. Scott announced, I've no idea what you just exploded in there, but it's done in our shields. We've got nothing protecting us now. On the screen, the Enterprise reappeared from the fire, free of the crossover device, still intact. Spock, does the Enterprise have shields? Her shields are down. Storage batteries are exhausted. Life support failing. Kirk's gamble had worked. He had won again. He allowed himself to fall back heavily in the helmsman's chair. Lock transporters on all life signs on the bridge. Beam everyone directly to the brig. Spock looked up. No life signs detected. There is no one left aboard her. Kirk's eyes widened. Scotty, transporter trace. Aye, sir. That's it, sir. 9 people beamed directly to the asteroid labor camp. Kirk struggled to his feet. He had to stop Tiberius. He could have anything hidden down there. Then LaForge shouted, Captain Picard, the Enterprise. She's on a 10-minute countdown to self-destruct. Kirk rose to his feet and turned to Picard. You have to save your ship, Captain. I'll find Tiberius. As Kirk headed for the turbolift, he heard Picard order his command crew on the Voyager to assemble in the transporter room. In the turbolift car, with Spock on one side of him, Telani on the other, Kirk looked toward the flight control console. Captain Janeway, you have the bridge. If there were limits to what one man could do, to how much pain he could withstand, Kirk hadn't found them yet. It had been known for centuries that the vacuum of interstellar space was more than simple nothingness. It seethed with quantum fluctuations, infinite amounts of energy and matter, created and annihilated so rapidly that the net effect was zero. But in rare places, for unknown reasons, the odds of nature broke down and the balance shifted from one side to another. One such region was the Golden Discontinuity. 4 weeks ago, the Enterprise under Jean-Luc Picard entered that discontinuity, searching for signs that Dominion and Cardassian forces might be trying to exploit the region's unstable space-time to create a wormhole. Instead, Picard's ship was captured by Alliance forces from the Mirror Universe, and her crew enslaved in a labor camp built on a nickel-iron asteroid no more than 15 kilometers in diameter. Before the camp had been attacked by Kirk and his team on the duplicate Voyager, a force field generator had maintained an atmosphere over the camp. Now, an hour later, the camp was exposed to vacuum. And in one precise location, near the center of that camp, that vacuum began to glow. 9 figures materialized on the gleaming metal surface of the first asteroid, dark silhouettes against the burning sky. The armor of their pressurized battlesuits gave them a harsh and alien appearance. In the sky beyond the boundaries of the camp, the ion distortions of the Golden Discontinuity writhed in a constant war of color. Directly above the 9 battle-suited figures loomed the oppressive mass of the second asteroid, also nickel-iron, moving on a newly disturbed orbit that in minutes would bring it within 200 meters of the first asteroid. The 9 began to run to the cluster of low, circular barracks surrounding a central overseer's command station. Tiberius led his 6 samurai and 2 commandants. He had no doubts about the destiny he would make for himself. The universe would be his. It was just a matter of time until every other living being, including the false reflections of the ghost universe, realized that truth and gave up their struggles against him. At the overseer's command station, when his soldiers were in the airlock at his side, Tiberius entered the code that would put the airlock through its cycle. Then he took one last look upward. The Enterprise hung lifeless in space a kilometer overhead. Beside her, the duplicate Voyager began to pull away. The enemy had realized that he and his soldiers had beamed from the Ghost Picard's ship. They were coming closer for transport and high-resolution sensor sweeps. Tiberius also knew the enemy would trace his beam in coordinates. Also, some of the ghosts would be boarding the Enterprise in a desperate attempt to save her from self-destruction. But the real enemy, the ghost Kirk, would be coming to this asteroid for him, and there would be nothing for him to find. After the airlock was repressurized, he pulled off his helmet and stepped through the opening and into the hot, oppressive air of the command center. Regent Picard awaited him. Tiberius swung the back of his hand against Picard's face. "You allowed your ghost to live. I saw him on the bridge of the Voyager, wearing your armor, with a Spock of this false universe, and the ghost Kirk." A thin thread of blood trickled from Picard's torn lip. "I cannot be held responsible for the failures of others?" "Yes, Jean-Luc, you can. And you will be." Tiberius's commandant of weapons, Geordi LaForge, interrupted. "Emperor, we have beam-ins." Tiberius turned from Picard to face his weapons master. The brilliant human whose skin was as dark as the armor he wore had been born without functioning eyes. So to tap his genius, Tiberius had gifted him with ocular grafts, Borg-like holographic lenses surrounded by dull gray metal, implanted deeply in each empty socket. LaForge held up his Cardassian combat sensor. 4 intruders, Federation transport signatures. The indicator lights on the sensor displays shifted. 4 more. Tiberius pointed to 3 of his samurai. "Take cover by those converters. Let the ghosts cycle through the lock, then kill them all, except for Kirk." The 3 samurais saluted their emperor and quickly took up their positions by the large power converters that rose from the polished metal floor of the command station. Tiberius turned to William Riker, his commandant of security. 17 minutes to crossover. Stay close." He led his remaining soldiers through a maze of additional power converters and storage containers to a large black storage container against a silver metal wall. Tiberius traced his fingers across an unmarked pattern on the shipping label. At once, A section of the container's side swung open to reveal a narrow passageway with a spiral staircase. Tiberius descended the stairs. At the bottom was a circular control room, 5 meters across, and it contained everything he needed. The vast subspace transmitter nodes and inactive power couplings were hidden elsewhere on the asteroid. They had to be. When the signal pulse went out, any living thing within a kilometer of these nodes would die. Tiberius had wished the camp to survive. But because Regent Picard had failed and the ghost Kirk had interfered, the camp was a total loss. However, Tiberius had not survived this long without an appreciation for contingencies. He powered up the consoles, brought the subspace nodes online, and started the warm-up of the long dormant power couplings. By now, Regent Picard and Commandant Riker had joined him. Picard challenged him. "How can you proceed like this?" "This has always been part of the plan, Jean-Luc. Once the device holding the Enterprise has fulfilled its function, all the other pieces must be brought to the board." "But the device failed. I saw it destroyed. The Enterprise is still up there. The ship didn't pass through the portal." "The device worked, Jean-Luc. It was never intended to be a portal to our universe from this false one. No transporter can be built on such a scale." Picard's mouth opened in shock. Then what was that thing?" "All you need to know is that it functioned as designed." Tiberius turned back to the controls. Another minute, and everything would be in place. The Forge shouted down the entry shaft. "They're here!" Tiberius ordered his commandant of weapons to come down into the control room, then had him seal the door. The 3 other samurai were left outside to fight. Tiberius saw the slight glimmer of fear in Riker's eyes. "Emperor, what if we don't cross over in time?" "Then we'll die like targs." Tiberius turned away from the Regent to locate a hidden panel in the curved wall. He held out his disruptor and fired. The wall panel melted into a spray of white light. Beyond was a small alcove, and in its floor, a single transporter disk. Regent Picard's protest was immediate. "That's a Federation transporter. That can't get us across without a multi-dimensional transporter device." Tiberius was rapidly losing patience. "It's preset to take us back to the surface. LaForge!" Instantly, his commandant of weapons stepped into the small transporter chamber, pulled on his helmet, sealed it, drew both of his disruptors, and nodded once. Tiberius touched the wall control. Picard and Riker looked up at the control room's door, but Tiberius kept his eye on the transporter control. When the power levels were restored, a 5-second process, he ordered the Regent to go next. Picard pulled on his helmet, and Tiberius started the transport. A beam was burning into the control door from the other side. Riker drew his weapon. "They're coming through. You go. I'll hold them here." Tiberius refused. "It might be James. Get on the pad." Riker sealed his helmet smartly, and Tiberius energized just as the phaser beam punched through the door. Tiberius calmly watched the transporter power display as it recycled. Then he stepped up on the pad. The transporter activation switch was just within reach. All he had to do was touch it, and he would be on the surface with the others. He checked the countdown display on the transmitter console. 8 minutes. He decided to wait, to see who would come down the stairs. If the situation were reversed, he knew what he would do. Ahead of Kirk, the edges of the hidden door still glowed from the phaser fire it had taken to burn through it. Spock held a tricorder to the opening. 1 life sign. Kirk knew who it would be. 9 had beamed down from the Enterprise. 6 were now dead. The ambushes had failed because Spock had been able to track the landing party. Everyone and everything from the mirror universe had a quantum signature unique to their reality. To Spock, the molecular debris scuffed from the boots of Tiberius' soldiers had stood out against the metal surface of the asteroid, as if they'd been footprints tracked through red paint. Though Kirk had been forced to stand by, doing nothing, at least his hands no longer hurt. McCoy had injected him with something to numb them. Then McCoy and Telani had replicated insulated construction mitts and attached them to the arms of Kirk's environment suit. Kirk's bandaged hands fit into them easily. Between the cumbersome mitts and McCoy's numbing injection, Kirk could do nothing with his hands, but this would be the end of his inaction. Kirk stepped through the phaser-blasted opening. "I'm going first." He heard Telani's voice. "No, James. I'll go. Or Taval. Someone who can carry a weapon." Kirk held his position. "He doesn't want to kill me. He needs me alive so I can see his victory." The control room was at the bottom of the stairs. Kirk's first glance at the consoles told him a countdown was underway, perhaps a self-destruct setting. But that didn't feel right. Defeat was not yet that certain for Tiberius. Then he saw the figure in the alcove. Massive, monstrous, and threatening in a combat environment suit. He knew at once the figure was Tiberius. Spock's voice echoed in his ear. "Do you see the life side?" Kirk looked across the control room directly at Tiberius. "Spock, it's him." Tiberius shifted forward on the pad, and Kirk saw a gleaming gold disruptor appear in a shaft of white light, but he wasn't afraid. Tiberius pressed the transporter control. "Spock, he just beamed out. Probably into the mirror universe. I'm following." He ran to the alcove, pressed his unwieldy mitt against the control pad until he saw an activation light glow, then stepped up onto the transporter disk. He knew without turning that Spock and Taval and Telani would be right behind him, and he could hear them shouting at him to stop. But this was time to act, not listen. Kirk turned back to see his three companions fade into a sparkling curtain, and then the light cleared and a heavy fist drove into his stomach. Kirk's breath exploded from him as he fell back upon the slick metal surface of the asteroid. Tiberius was standing over him like an avenging demon. Gasping for air, Kirk pushed himself to concentrate on Tiberius's lips to read what he was saying. A ghost, a shadow, nightmare. 5 meaningless words. Then a shadow fell over Tiberius, and he wheeled and ran off. Kirk pushed himself up, looked up to see where the shadow had come from. The second asteroid now filled the sky completely. Darkness replaced the wild shifting colors of the golden discontinuity. Kirk heaved himself to his feet and saw Tiberius 50 meters away, swiftly running beyond the cluster of barracks. "Spock! Telani! I'm on the surface of the asteroid." No answer. His communicator wasn't functioning. The fall must have damaged the circuitry in his helmet. Kirk began running after his counterpart, hoping Spock's tricorder would find him. As he ran, he glanced up at the overhead asteroid. Now so close he felt he could almost jump up and touch its speeding bulk. As he ran, he thought of the Enterprise. Somewhere beyond, on a 10-minute countdown to self-destruct, Jean-Luc Picard's time to save her was almost up. The transporter's beam delivered Picard to the bridge of his ship. At once, his eyes sought out all the displays that were still functioning. The Enterprise was dying, but she wasn't dead yet. Picard was already on his way to the security station as Riker and Data resolved from their beams. In the darkness, he almost stepped into a circular opening in the wall and deck where the station used to be. Will, the security station's gone. The command chair was also missing. In its place, another circular hole in the deck, as if a Borg tractor beam had been at work.
Self-destruct in 5 minutes.
Picard told his officers, "Find me a station. Anything I can use to input my access code." Data was soon at the auxiliary engineering station. It was intact. "Captain, this console will permit you to contact the secondary computers." Picard swiftly crossed the bridge. "Computer, This is Picard. 47 Alpha Tango.
Identity accepted.
Cancel destruct sequence Alpha 1.
You do not have authorization to disable auto-destruct. Self-destruct in 4 minutes.
Riker, to Voyager. We need you standing by for emergency beam out. Captain Scott replied. Aye, I've locked onto you, lad. But I have to warn you, these transporters are getting touchy. I don't know if I can get you all out in one go. Data turned to Picard. Perhaps it will not accept your authorization because you are not one of the officers who initiated auto-destruct. Computer, this is Commander Data. Authorization Delta India 01. Replay command sequence authorizing auto-destruct. From all the bridge speakers, the audio recording began. The first voice Picard heard was unmistakably Tiberius. Data continued. Sir, I suggest we beam real Captain Kirk to the Enterprise so he can order the sequence to be canceled. A second voice came from the speakers. William Riker's. Picard saw the shock on his first officer's face. So Riker had a counterpart as well. And then the third officer was heard, who identified himself as Commander LaForge.
Self-destruct in 3 minutes, 30 seconds.
Data looked at Riker. Commander, I believe the computer will listen to you. Riker, still visibly shaken, spoke to the console. Computer, this is Commander William Riker. Cancel destruct sequence Alpha 1. On the small display, Picard watched as the countdown numbers froze. He and Riker exhaled deeply in relief, then looked at Data, who had also done the same despite the fact the android did not have to breathe. Data shrugged. I was simply getting into the spirit of the moment. Picard to Voyager, self-destruct has been cancelled. We are ready to beam back and go down to the asteroid to help Kirk. Energize. Nothing happened. Captain Scott, we've had a wee bit of a problem. The main transporter circuits have fused. What about Kirk and the search party? I'm afraid they're on their own, sir. We have no way of helping them until the rescue ships arrive. Picard, Riker, and Data had one reply to that situation. Picard yelled, "Hangar deck!" The Enterprise had shuttlecraft. To help Kirk, it was time to use them. As Tiberius ran across the metal surface of the asteroid, he had no need to check his tactical display. He knew he had 2 minutes left, long enough to win a universe or lose one. His confrontation with the other Kirk had been disappointing. He had planned to kill his ghost universe double. It baffled him still that they could be so much alike, yet so different. How to account for the fact that in this universe, Kirk was little more than a vassal to an ineffectual Starfleet serving a spineless Federation? The other Kirk was a mistake, but still, it wasn't enough to merely kill the other Kirk. He needed the other Kirk to understand why he was being destroyed. An error being corrected. The Emperor tapped the forearm control that activated his helmet's tactical display. A holographic projection on his faceplate showed him he was being followed by 4 pursuers, one far ahead of the others. The Ghost Kirk. Tiberius was only 100 meters from the edge of the asteroid. He was aware that artificial gravity generators had been installed to make this flattened section of the nickel-iron mountain an arbitrary surface. The gravity field ended at the sharp ridge ahead. Tiberius stared up. The other asteroid, what the ghosts mistakenly believed was the second asteroid, was 200 meters overhead, spinning as if it were about to scrape everyone and everything from the surfaces of both. He looked ahead. Commandants Riker and LaForge had each drawn their disruptors. Tiberius signaled them to put their weapons away. If the ghost Kirk was that eager to meet his death, then Tiberius would take full responsibility for seeing Kirk wasn't disappointed. Kirk refused to stop his mad run across the asteroid. He'd be damned before he'd let Tiberius get away. He had to know if he himself was the cause of what befell the humans and the Vulcans in the Mirror Universe. Not Tiberius, but James T. Kirk, the starship captain who crossed from one universe to another 108 years ago, who had a single conversation with the mirror counterpart of Mr. Spock. Was he responsible for the total chaos that had consumed that other universe? If he had not crossed over, if he had not planted the idea of revolution in that other Spock's mind, would humans and Vulcans have never become slaves to the Alliance? Tiberius was the key. That same Tiberius who now waited for him at the edge of the asteroid. Tiberius was not alone. Kirk saw 3 other figures with him, weapons drawn. The second asteroid was just now passing the edge of this flat surface. Then Kirk saw that the other 3 figures had put away their weapons because Tiberius had ordered them to do so. It seemed the Emperor intended to meet his double on an equal basis. Tiberius detected indecision in the ghost Kirk's eyes, until the moment Kirk put on a burst of speed and his target became obvious. Tiberius shouted for his soldiers to move out of the way, but Kirk had timed his approach perfectly, heading straight for Tiberius as if he too intended to face his double, until at the last possible moment he pivoted to barrel roll into the 3 bystanders. LaForge leapt clear, but Kirk slammed into Riker and Picard. Commandant Riker fell back to the very edge of the asteroid, his helmet hanging over the side. Tiberius watched with surprise and grudging admiration as Kirk threw himself at Riker's life support module and pounded both of his hands on one side of it. Suddenly, its back-mounted air replenisher expelled a burst of vapor strong enough to push Riker off the edge and out of the gravity field. Kirk kept moving, driving his shoulder into Regent Picard's back. Tiberius saw the Regent twist as he fell to keep his helmet from hitting the asteroid's metal surface. Kirk took advantage of the Regent's panic to relieve him of his only weapon, a Klingon mek'leth. But Kirk's move came too late. Tiberius was now to one side of Kirk, far enough away to draw and fire his disruptor should Kirk attempt to charge him. And Commandant LaForge was on the other side, his disruptor already in hand. Tiberius was curious to see what his ghost would do next. He saw that Kirk was holding the Regent's short-bladed weapon like a child, squeezing both hands against its rear hilt. Then Tiberius remembered what he had seen on the view screen. Kirk's hands had been bandaged. He can't use his hands. LaForge's voice came over the helmet speakers. Emperor, it's time. Give me the word. Put your weapon away, Commandant, and prepare to cross over. Tiberius strode toward his ghost, not even hurrying. Kirk thrust the mek'leth forward. Pathetic, Tiberius thought. The weakling's trying for my leg. He has no desire to kill me. Tiberius swung his arm down to deflect the attack, then grabbed both of Kirk's wrists as the mek'leth tumbled away. He drew Kirk up to face him and squeezed one of Kirk's hands. Kirk's eyes narrowed. His face paled. Tiberius could feel Kirk's body tremble. He leaned forward until their helmets touched. You know my works. You know they could have been yours as well, in your existence. Having betrayed your destiny by not achieving my greatness, how can you even bear to live? Your works. I've seen Earth laid waste and dying because of you. Spoils of war, James. You, on the other hand, have achieved nothing but a nightmare of your own making. Let me free you. Tiberius moved to reach behind and release the seal on Kirk's helmet. Kirk's head suddenly snapped forward, driving his helmet into Tiberius's. Cracks spread through both faceplates. Tiberius released Kirk in shock.
Life support failure in 45 seconds.
Tiberius bolted for the edge of the asteroid, leaving Kirk behind. But Tiberius felt his boot catch on something. It was Kirk. Tiberius began to fall. He shot out both arms to keep his helmet from hitting the solid metal surface. He rolled onto his back and kicked out at Kirk. He shouted to LaForge and Picard, "Kill him!" Kirk was crawling toward him, his own faceplate crazed with dark lines. Tiberius dared to turn his head for a second to see why LaForge and Picard had refused to obey his order. He was just in time to see the Regent throwing himself from the edge of the asteroid, his body beginning its downward arc with the rushing bulk of the second asteroid. Commandant LaForge, though, was on one knee, firing his disruptor at the others. The ghost Kirk was not alone. As Kirk's followers charged forward, Tiberius cried out, "No!" He had not come this far to be beaten by ghosts. This was not his destiny. Kirk felt as if he were trailing his hands through molten lava, but still he crawled forward. He knew Taval and Telani and Spock would deal with Tiberius' soldiers, but Tiberius was his responsibility. Either he and Tiberius would beam up to the Voyager together, or they would die here together. In his helmet, he heard the computer voice,
"Life support failure in 30 seconds.
If he could just hold on a few more seconds till Scotty got a transporter lock on them. At that moment, Tiberius lifted his head and angled his helmet so that once again Kirk looked into the face of his double. Both Kirks stared at each other, unmindful of death, focused only on their struggle. Then Tiberius savagely jammed his elbow into Kirk's fractured faceplate. Kirk's vision blurred as Tiberius rolled out from under him. He felt the pure cold of vacuum suck the moisture from his skin. He reached out to grab Tiberius just as the monster reached the edge of the asteroid, then pushed himself off. Kirk pulled himself to that edge, determined to follow, even as darkness swirled at the edge of his vision. Suddenly, Tiberius was consumed in a flash of phaser fire. Gone. At least he died first, Kirk thought, even as a fading image of Telani and the child he would never know flickered from his awareness. Then, the darkness was absolute. Dr. Andrea Mbenga wanted answers, and she wanted them now. But the runabout pilot had nothing to say to her beyond a few muttered and insincere apologies. She slipped into the empty co-pilot's chair. "Ensign Adamski, let's start at the beginning. You came to Deep Space Nine to take me from my duties there, to attend a classified Starfleet medical seminar on new biological weapons being used by the Dominion. Is that correct?" The pilot finally deigned to glance at her. "Doctor, I'm really sorry, but there is no medical seminar. And my name isn't Adamski." Mbenga sat back in her chair. Her initial annoyance, which had been threatening to become anger, shifted closer to sudden apprehension. There was a war on, and the Founders were shapeshifters. Answer me this. Is this or is this not a Starfleet runabout? The pilot nodded. That I can answer, yes. This is a Starfleet runabout. This is a Starfleet mission, but I'm under orders, Commander. Commodore Twining will be able to answer your questions. Through the slanted viewport, she saw flashing lights ahead. They were coming up on an orbital facility of some kind. It appeared to Mbenga to be a standard Starfleet design, a series of large, disc-shaped habitats stacked together, one atop the other on a central spine. Mbenga caught sight of a Starfleet emblem on the topmost habitat disc. The pilot touched a communications control. "This is the Runabout Ohio, requesting docking information."
Runabout Ohio, you are cleared for docking in Bay 5.
A lavender beam shot out from the facility and glimmered over the viewport. As the runabout was drawn toward the opening pressure doors of docking Bay 5, two details moved M'Benga's apprehension closer to fear. The letters beneath the Starfleet emblem spelled out Agricultural Research Station 51, Alpha Centauri 4. And in the area directly above the docking bay doors, she saw phaser emitters, poorly disguised as an old-fashioned subspace relay and big enough for a starship.